Betsy?
Yes, I have consented.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
And so maybe I'll start it out again by just saying this is Milwaukee Area Co-Housing and Cooperatives, and we're super excited to have Betsy, I forgot your last name, Betsy Morris.
I'll put my name in my actual picture, Betsy Morris, that's right.
Betsy Morris with us. I'll let Betsy introduce herself a little bit more, and then maybe just the couple of us that are on the call can tell you who we are, Betsy, and then you can get going.
Sure.
So here, I'll go first. I'll start with myself. I've been with MAC about a year, and getting pretty familiar with co-housing, but definitely interested in affordability. Jerome.
I've been with her longer than a year. And so I happen to be an architect, do specification writing for other firms. And the whole idea of, co-housing, very, interesting and intriguing, and should be a good way to work. I hope I can do what I can to promote it here.
Thanks. And just tell me your name again.
Oh, Gerard Capel.
Gerard. Great. With a J or with a G?
G.
Okay. I'll get last names later. Yeah.
Patricia, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Pat Valentine, and just recently learned about the Milwaukee Area Cooperative or Co-Housing and Cooperative effort. And my husband and I are both retired. My husband's semi-retired, but we live a couple hours drive north of Milwaukee, but we have two grown children living in Milwaukee, and one of them has a family that is also interested in co-housing, and we just wanted to learn more, and we're along for the ride, and we don't know a lot at this point, and we're eager to learn.
And Ellen, you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. I'm Ellen Steffen. I've been with MAC for about 4 years. I was looking at some old paperwork, and it was 2017 when we were working on the Center Street project. I'm more or less the sort of treasurer for the group. I handle the checkbook and take memberships and pay bills, and it's unofficial, but that's what I do. I'm retired. My daughters, one of them is in the Air Force, will be moving back to the Midwest in the fall, probably October. And my older daughter lives in Kenosha, which is about an hour south of Milwaukee. So if this co-housing thing doesn't go forward, I'm probably going to sell my house and move somewhere in the southeastern corner of the state, halfway between Illinois and Kenosha. But I'm hoping this works. I really like the community spirit, the intentional community aspect of co-housing. And I don't need a lot of space. I'm just an empty nester right now with a 3-bedroom house that I'm downsizing. So, yeah, I don't know. We were expecting a couple of other people tonight. I don't know if they'll maybe log on in a little bit, but at least we've got you, and we can get some basic information from you and go from there.
Yeah, and if you wish, you have some next steps homework that you can assign to them. You can volunteer them for. So this is really a pleasure. I don't know if you had the chance to get more of my background, but really it's kind of my world has been converging. I've always been motivated by the concept of what is community, ever since I encountered it as a totally lost, moving into a shared group house at the age of, well, I guess 19 was the first shared group house, but I became conscious of what we were doing as a we when I was 20, 21, 22, and I'm 66 now. So it's been a wild ride. I lost touch with it while I was deeply involved in a city planning master's, and then a PhD program. I have lots of credentials, and I'm glad for them because it makes some of my forays, what, I used to just call, these are my wild and crazy ideas. And now the world is caught up with a lot of wild and crazy ideas. And creating community is definitely important. And I think it can save the planet, and it can happen anywhere at any time. And it is very hard. I mean, it takes work and effort, and it takes creative thinking and openness. So, but once something is created, there's a chance for those communities to grow and flourish, even if they didn't start the way they were dreamed of. But if you build in certain infrastructure, you can think about, the foundation can be there to grow. So what does that mean when it comes to affordability? I'm really appreciative. Who was it who actually listened to or saw a PowerPoint presentation I did? Was it a PowerPoint or just a recording?
It was
Julie?
just you talking.
Well, get used to that. No, I actually do have PowerPoints because I wrote an article about affordability strategies from the point of view of someone who both knew enough about co-housing, lived in affordable co-housing. And I also, from my city planning, community development, sort of professional perspective, knew about the affordable housing industry or the sector. I actually kind of wrote about the emergence of what I call the community sector, and didn't even include co-housing at that point, but it's part of where's the world that creates affordable housing. So let me just say, so I brought it together in 2005, I think, or six. No, I wrote an article because I could see it was a big gap in our knowledge. And I started running workshops with Dean Peterson, who's the founder of a senior co-housing mixed blended market rate. And I think it's Section 8 affordable rental in her community in Virginia. And she and I ran maybe not the first workshop at a co-housing conference, but we were early. And now it's much more urgently understood why we need to have knowledge about this and share knowledge about affordability strategies. So if I get too policy wonk or detailed, flash me a cue card, back me out, please facilitate me. I know too much to be brief, but I want to really answer direct questions when I can.
We'll take as much as you can give us, Betsy. We are hungry for this.
Oh, okay. Well, I think part of this is a little bit of a tryout for whether you want to have more of an ongoing relationship, which would be lovely. I want to first just acknowledge that architects, and certainly McCammett and Durrett, did their best to keep costs low and to help groups understand what's called value engineering, which is where can you save money in the building of your community. And so architects and contractors are very, they're very attuned to what things cost, and a good architect can help you save money on construction costs. And also, if you've read from an architect's point of view, there's choices you can make that will lower the operation budget, meaning the heating, the water, the costs of living in your home and of having common dues through the HOA, whether it's a cooperative board or a condominium board. There's expenses for that. Of course, you'll be maintaining in common, and the more joyful that can be, as stewards, I think the more budgets and financial understanding can become not a threatening thing, which it is for some people, but really an empowerment, because we budgets to me are like little stories of what we value rather than like a tool to crush dissent. So let me just again go back up to that particular perspective. Chuck and Jim Leach from Wonderland, you know, those experts really can talk about that level of affordability. That's not my expertise, but I did document where certain strategies that helped. But honestly, the big crisis is we are at a time when construction costs, labor costs in the construction industry and land prices are in a perfect storm of escalation. Labor and production costs might be coming down slightly because Canada is now producing materials, but those kinds of affordability, I don't think that's not on your radar yet, and you don't need to be, except in one area that I would encourage you to look into, and that is modular, or I'm sorry, not modular housing, but manufactured housing. If the city of Milwaukee will allow you, there are manufacturers of cute little cottage houses, right? You can get a plain Jane box, you know, for less, and you can add decks and landscaping. So it's possible, if you're willing to overcome what's pretty much a class prejudice among my class of middle-class homeowner types, that, you know, we have to, that anything, you know as well as I do, poverty and low income is a stigma among middle-class homeowners, and that is breaking down because of that. I believe that's breaking down because many people who always thought of themselves as buffered are now looking at their budgets as they get old, and they don't have a multi-million-dollar house that they're going to sell to move into a what do you call, a turnkey ready community. So I just want to acknowledge I'm not following an organized script here, so I'm a little bit freewheeling.
That's
And
okay.
Forgive me, but I bring that up, the urgency, because man, Milwaukee, I'm looking at prices on the real estate and they're super duper low, probably not for people's incomes in Milwaukee, but the price per square foot that an existing home is selling for is like between $100 and $200 a square foot. And, you know, just at the end of the day, it does come back to how much house can you individually afford. And so to me, there's this wonderful learning journey in which self-knowledge or household knowledge and frankness over, you know, what you actually have and what you can put into your new home. You're in a fantastic housing market if you are buying an existing home there. I hope. You might not be. I'm not saying everybody can afford a $116,000 or $200,000 house, but you're in a great market. And at the same time, it's going to be a hard sell because you have to provide, you do want to have housing that will attract not only the converted, you know, and committed, but at least some people. At the end of the day, you're going to need some folks who need to see the community you're creating as worth more than, that's worth the additional money that it's going to take to build new in this particular landscape of the perfect storm of rising prices in construction. And I'm going to ask Gerard if this is true in Milwaukee, because I love Milwaukee. I visited, I have friends there. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And I think it's a great place to go. And you can attract people with low cost, but only some people, you know. So at the end, it's also high quality of life, a living community of support that you will be able to use, you know, as a way, that the foundation you create is your own good relationships. So I'm wandering afield here, but money, relationships, time, and actual market costs within your area are all a piece of the puzzle of affordability. Let me go to a couple of things.
I think, well,
Yeah.
and maybe what we kind of mentioned, I think before we really started, but this, you know, I don't know if you can talk to this idea of if you've seen it work elsewhere where they've had a mixture of like the market rate and then sort of below market rate units and maybe some of the mechanisms that we can use to fund those below market rate.
Yeah, I can get into that. Sometimes I get filled with what didn't work. So you will be navigating two sources of funding, of two funding streams. First, banks are not loving on co-housing right now. Hopefully in your community they are, but what used to be a strong point, the banking industry, it's just tough all over. They're not interested in affordability. They're not interested in pre-occupancy sales. They want to just know you're going to pay them back, and they prefer, they're hard. So build a relationship with your bankers right away. Like start exploring this with them. And there's two levels of banking. You're going to want a construction, land purchase and construction loan, right? And you're going to be preparing for what would the future costs of the units be. So I just want to, from the market rate perspective, it's not necessarily easier to get funded. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so negative.
Okay.
But let me just say, yes, start your relationship building with banks to find a regional bank who would be willing to finance market rate condos. Getting financing to build a cooperative legal, a structure that's going to have a cooperative legal framework is actually is challenging. One of the reasons co-ops haven't proliferated is because pretty much you can't get a mortgage for a co-op share. You get
although in Minnesota and Wisconsin, perhaps there's more familiarity.
Excellent. And credit unions are good people to explore because they're technically co-op. But so co-op development is there's people who specialize, especially in senior co-op. There's a special pond of money for senior co-ops. And if we want to go into more details about co-ops, I'd be glad to. Our community had long and lengthy desires between people who wanted to be a co-op so that the equity would all be equal. And the reality is that getting a share loan for an equity co-op shares is very difficult and expensive. And you don't go through the standard co-op market. So we ended up with condominium. One of the strategies that we used that actually helped us get approved by the city is we used a strategy in Berkeley co-housing, and I only know of one other or a couple of other communities that have used this at the community scale. We agreed to have a shared equity or a capped equity return, which means our sale prices started out moderate income and were just affordable to the people who started the community. And we agreed to the city required a 30-year time limit on that. So actually our community agreed to permanently capping our return. And in fact, everyone would have still makes out handsomely. You know, nobody's losing money. In fact, the formula guarantees that no one will lose money, I suppose, unless the whole economy tanks. And the banks still are protected for the mortgages, but right now our home value prices are, half to a third of the homes selling around us, right? So condos are always a little bit less to begin with, but I just being aware of the market system is good. So within the affordable housing pantheon of programs, there's and I don't know if there's notes or I hope you'll catch this, but knowing your own income, knowing are you eligible for various down payment assistance programs that many cities and counties provide. There's so on a personal level, preparing yourself for whether you qualify as low income or very low income or moderate income, because knowing where you are in those categories that HUD, HUD defines those categories and publishes numbers based on your area median income. So getting to know what HUD says and understanding yourself. And then you all as members, at some point, you are going into business together and you need some transparency among yourselves and honesty about your ability, not just your preference, but your ability to contribute, what's fair for you to contribute. That's still assuming there's sort of a primary public, a market rate. You might be able to create what you want as eligible moderate income people who have a few people who are higher income, and you could create potentially agreements among yourselves about whether your city, let me back up a minute. So finding out what your city's housing department, what their goals are, or the county, if you're in the county of Milwaukee, finding out what are the public goals around creating housing, creating mixed income housing, and do you fall into a special category? For example, do some of your members or a majority of your members preferably fall into a category of particular interest? That will allow you to think about your community as we're meeting public goals by providing, and I don't know what the need is in your community, but you might think about that. Most co-housing communities don't think about that, but it's sooner or later when you're applying for public money, it's good to know where are you meeting the goals of whether it's the city, the county, or HUD. So yes, here's the second thing to think about on that is partnerships with knowledgeable, affordable housing advocates and allies, I think is crucial. Like it's just really hard to build up all the knowledge you need to get a co-housing community built. But in your own backyard, have you already talked to Madison Area Community Land Trust, or MALT, I think it's called, and they were the builders of Troy Gardens. Am I right about that, Rains? That's my memory. Troy Gardens, it was built with a lot of public money, but also private money that was allocated because it met a need for moderate income home ownership, right? Low and moderate income home ownership, and they have market rate units in there. Now they're 15 years old now, I think, and they couldn't afford to build a common house because the budget, they weren't able to raise the money from their sources to build a common house. Perhaps your community can think about asking MALT or the person who developed that particular Troy Gardens, maybe be a consultant, maybe be a guide, or just give you a talk, and that's a nonprofit, so they might have the ability to share, in multiple meetings. And maybe you could ask to be a project with them. So I don't know if you've already done that research, but that's the closest to home group. The difference would be certain public financing programs do not allow you to physically mix the affordable common facilities with the market rate common facilities. So and there's, I'm not a affordable housing financial specialist, because there are experts and that's all they do. And when the time comes, you may want such a person to manage the application and the documentation, but you can explore this. What are you eligible for? And do you if you're more than half market rate, you'll only be eligible for certain things or no additional funds. If you're, say, 60% low and moderate income, that might be in the sweet spot for your city or county. I don't, or housing, state housing programs.
So the place that we would find that out from would be like our city housing department or something would be a good place to start?
Yeah, especially the affordable housing officer, or usually the city itself might have its own liaison around affordable housing.
I think we've
But there is-
already, I think one of our members, I think Nola, who tried to join this call a couple minutes ago, I think she's been in touch with someone that person at the city. And there's a lot of money coming right now from the feds for a lot of this stuff.
Great.
So, yeah.
So what I would say is, if you want to retain the cooperative culture and a consensus base, and if you want to retain control over the management of your community, there's going to be you're going to be riding two horses for a while to see what programs, if any, will meet your goals. Because, but I do believe partnerships, especially community land trusts, I think can be much more flexible than, and just be aware. Right now, there are investor-oriented real estate companies they operate in the nonprofit affordable housing world, and the financing is enormously complex and probably won't be your friend. So maybe I'm premature to say this, but there's a nonprofit here that partnered with the Cohousing company, designed a beautiful community that was going to be a very low income community mix of low income folks and people really just coming out of homelessness, so extremely low income under poverty. And there's mortgage, mostly is rental assistance, and that is a way that you could really get fuller income diversity in your community. But that particular community couldn't sustain a co-housing culture. Like, they didn't really have, it wasn't like a group of residents met for months ahead of time to hash things out. There were a lot of misconceptions because I hope you will build bridges. There's plenty of wonderful people who essentially have ended up with extremely low incomes who are boomers and others, but there is a cultural difference. And I'm not but one has to do with, is this somebody who's had experience and wants to be cooperating? One of the strategies for affordability is simply that the city or the county public housing authority buys some units, or in Massachusetts and some other states are required to essentially turn over some units to be rented to people who are on a waiting list for the city or county for the most vulnerable people. And that is how Elder Spirit. So the community in Virginia called Elder Spirit was the pioneering blended mix. So you had people who had agreed, they bought a market rate home, and across the sidewalk were 2-story flats that were rented through the Section 8 Public Housing Authority. And I think it would be well worth having conversation. You may not have that deep of a divide, plus the founders of that community were former nuns. So they had a social mission, to be part of a blended community. And it didn't always work. Mostly, just who participates, who has the leisure time and the psychic bandwidth and likes having meetings. Well, it's not something that everybody loves. And those of us who love it tend to be college graduate degree we're used to it, and not everybody else is used to it. So having a blended cultural community is important. There's also, so now I'm getting into difficulties. Let me not talk about those. In fact, why don't we pause? Because I've mentioned staying true to your vision is important, and the programs that you could apply to are competitive. And I think you're best off with a partner to help you navigate the ins and outs. Those are for forming partnerships that would bring in external money to subsidize the construction and of the future apartments or the future units, your homes. there's another really important role internally around making sure each and every one of your members, assuming you don't have like a the largest of all bank accounts, that you use the funding, that you use down payment assistance and loan programs targeted to people who have low and moderate incomes. And that might be the majority of people in Milwaukee. But I would say that Madison, what's the co-housing community in Madison that's closest to the State House?
Is that the Arboretum?
Arboretum. Yeah, so they had a member who was a lawyer, and she personally guided every purchaser there, every community member, through a financial coaching, got them ready for the application for the funds so they could all get as men, and I'm blanking on her name, but I would invite you to talk to her. And there's probably an equivalent in Milwaukee. That's another. Madison has that, and you might maybe make a field trip to those two communities. It's not that Arboretum has a bunch of, I don't think they have any subsidized units. No.
As far, I've been to Arboretum. We did tour the
Yeah.
facility a couple years ago, 3 years ago or so. And
Yep.
I don't believe Arboretum is particularly low income or below market rate.
So yeah, so what they did though is every co-housing community has people who are stretched to belong once the reality of the land costs and the home purchase prices are factored in. So having someone on your team or building a relationship to, this is your internal preparedness, that'll be a very helpful member of your team. So
I believe with Arboretum that had a partnership with Habitat for the houses, on the site. That
did Habitat build a couple of the units?
I don't think built, but they were able to like retain some of the houses and then make them available.
Oh, that might already be.
Habitat participated in the remodeling and restructuring of a couple of duplexes that adjoined the Arboretum complex.
Yep. And Habitat for Humanity also built a couple of units with at least one of the Boulder communities. I can't remember if it's Nomad or one of the others.
Wild Sage.
Yeah, Wild Sage. And I will say that Habitat has changed, right? And different chapters are now essentially operating as contractors building housing in bulk. They're not focusing on the one house at a time with a body of volunteers. I mean, they may still have that, but they're basically, to survive, they've moved into being contractors, and sometimes they have city contracts to do upgrades and, or to take care of rehabbing. I don't know about building new, but they do. You might talk to Habitat. Would that be a good development partner for you? They also have wait lists, or they used to have wait lists of people who would qualify as low or moderate income working families. That might increase if you are committed to racial or ethnic diversity, that might be one way in. Keep in mind that, working families these days are not working 40 hours a week, they're working 60, and they hardly have any time to help out. And I don't mean to generalize, but I'm just preparing you to, at the end of the day, it's your own time and labor that will keep costs down in the community, as far as not just, a spend condo kind of operation. All right, so your own internal transparency and willingness to talk about money is going to be important to figure out what you can afford as a group. But having a partner that has done certain types of blended projects or willing to work with you is a great way to build up your capacity, so that it isn't all just dependent on individuals, recruiting enough individuals who have enough money to launch this enterprise. I want to put something down. So which do you think is most important? The internal being prepared and finding your way into down payment assistance household by household? Or do you think you need to know more about what does it mean to take out a bank loan and buy property, you know, and start with trying to get money that's cheap enough that the costs at the end of the day will be low enough for what you can afford. What, in other words, construction or as a group or household? What do you think you want to go talk about now? Household finances or yeah, forming your LLC to buy land, and is there subsidy to bring down the cost of it as a group through partnerships?
I'm kind of more interested in the second. I don't know about everybody else. Carol, Alan, Patricia.
I will say that's the part that's the biggest, you know, most people don't really get how developments get built. And I am not going to claim to be a developer myself, but I've read many projections and read many business plans. And, you know, I want to say, I don't know of any free money. You know, there's no grants for co-housing. But yeah, partnering to design two things. One is understanding who you are and how that fits in with public goals that would, to figure out where do you qualify for cheaper construction loans or loan guarantees, things that are really hidden, but can make or break a project. They're hidden from most people who just buy a home. So you're the finance person right now, Julie, and you might want to take a class, or all of you could consider it. There's an outfit called the Neighborhood Academy. I think it's called that now. They changed the name, and it's out of a 40-year movement called the Neighborhood Housing Services. And these were from the 60s and early 70s when local community funding of local community projects, housing rehab just exploded. And then of course, my apologies, but Republicans and Democrats clawed that money back. But one of the legacies is the neighborhood, I'll have to look it up. I'm sorry, Neighborhood Academy. And it's it's a little mini set of trainings, mini meaning it happens 4 times a year. And it's a very sophisticated curriculum, and it's for neighborhood housing advocates and community development advocates who are owning and building and borrowing money to bring more land and more housing into something nonprofit local control. And this is the community sector I was talking about. And there's more openings there now, more interest, I would say, in co-housing type collaborations, especially, you know, when you think about as a public health matter, neighbors looking out for neighbors is now getting a lot of public support from the public health community, right? So I don't know the Milwaukee scene. I think we mentioned Habitat, we mentioned some in Madison. I would, you know, if you were, one of the things you could do, or you could hire me to do, or whatever, is to Google. I encourage you to do it yourself if you can. But it often takes a little bit of searching to figure out the best possible allies and to make sure you aren't overlooking some ally because you just happen to use the keyword search that missed them. But the city can only tell you so much. Your city council member in the district you'd like to build in, it will be helpful if you find someone for whom your presence as I shouldn't generalize, sorry, as exactly for who you are, white seniors of a certain level of stability in your lives. Would you be an asset to the neighborhood, or would you be gentrifying it and displacing people? I'm deeply involved in that issue. So, and different neighborhoods want different things, you know, some want to have more educated people move in. And again, I don't mean to generalize, but every city has its more impoverished neighborhoods where property owners would like to have you in there. You know, homeowners would like to have you in there. So you could also, I'm going a little sideways because I tend to think about how do you build relationships that will support your vision and benefit others, you know, and I want to say that by talking to affordable housing groups, or advocates for housing, you build the language of cooperative community, which I think is dearly needed, and there's no budgeting for it. So now I'm getting into the weeds. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
thinking
okay.
about,
But I did want to
negotiating.
say, I wanted to say, I think we're sort of on the same wavelength in that I
Great.
even like over the summer. So we've got a diversity/affordability committee, and we were going in the same direction and kind of saying, listen, there's a lot of groups in town that are already doing affordable housing, and we should be coordinating with them. We should be partnering. We should at least be learning about what they're doing. And so we did an online event where we invited a lot of those groups together, and we're trying to reach out to them. And some of our members are pretty connected in that way, but they couldn't be on the call today. And we've started to make calls like to the city and talk to our alderperson and things like that. So there's always more that can be done along those lines, and it's good to hear you kind of pointing that way, because I think we could do more of that.
And I would encourage it to be that certainly that going to their meetings is definitely a sign of respect across racial lines, in my experience, rather than why don't you come to our meetings?
Right, exactly. And we've fallen into that trap. Like, we invited them to our, old white people meeting, and how come nobody showed up? But we aren't going to their meetings. Exactly. And we've talked about that. So I do think that we're definitely, kind of slowly chipping away at that.
It's being good ambassadors. I don't see it as everybody becomes one giant group, but rather, just respecting the needs of different communities and community members. I would say, for example, if you have the bandwidth, if you're asking city council, you can, is churches churches with elderly members are sometimes looking to create housing. And maybe there's a partnership of, just convergence of like two side-by-side communities that can supplement or complement. Doesn't have to be, there's the affordable housing world has focused a lot in certain areas on like immigrants or seniors of, in churches for the Black community, or for whoever their church is, whoever the community is. You're also a community, and you're offering, you just want to explore, could you if they have a piece of property that is too big for them to develop, they don't have the financial ability, would it be possible to have, a one community or two sets of buildings with different management ownership structures? I just am asking your city council members. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the political brownie points, that if there's competition for affordable housing money, you probably thought about this, or, it would happen almost in every city. It's not just who but we are about cooperative culture, not just I think a particular form of real estate.
Right. Right. I want to just say, Rains is doing a super job in the chat of, for one, pointing out that we only have 5 minutes left. And I like, it is what you're saying here, Rains. The trick in any development is overcoming not in my backyard neighbor opposition, and at the same time doing affordable, integrated, building relationships so folks can see you as real people and overcome their preconceptions. Yeah, so I think, that's, definitely something we've started to just think about, because now we know where we're probably building, and starting to think about some of the stuff you're saying, in terms of, are we gentrifying or not? Like, as a matter of fact, the building that we're thinking about building has a bunch of food trucks in it. And we're worried about what if are we going to be perceived as the people who kicked the cute little food trucks out of their building there where they were using it to create, there's kitchens in there and they were storing their trucks and stuff like that. So there's always all that stuff to think about. I wanted to say, because we only do have a couple minutes left, I don't know if either Carol or Patricia wanted to just quick ask Betsy something that you didn't get the chance to ask.
I recognize the deer in the headlights look.
I am just happy to listen. So I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Patricia, anything?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear a lot of the points that you've brought up, Betsy, and just the idea of cooperatives or co-housing and how they relate to one another has a lot to do with what you're talking about tonight too. And so, I personally need to explore more about what that relationship might be and how it might be advantageous for the affordability piece of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I want to make clear anything I'm saying is not about saying, well, so let me just start. Cooperatives as a legal structure, there is co-housing community that's set up as a cooperative ownership structure. Monterey Co-housing in Minneapolis is the one that I'm most familiar.
One portion of it, the other part is condo.
Okay, so there you have a combination, and you might talk to Joelle or one of the other founders.
Gerard and I have visited that co-housing.
Okay, I have not. How is it worth exploring further? Did you get to? Yep.
Yeah, we had a very nice tour through the facility. It's really an interesting site, if I'm remembering it correctly.
That's the convent with the new buildings on the other
So it
side.
was an older convent core building that was an older, like over 100 years, and definitely kind of pieced together for minimal living spaces. And then there was a set of newer apartments that were built along the hillside, and then the open space between it.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of an interesting combination there of fitting between the people that could had the means and methods to stay in a larger, newer facility. Most of those had families.
Families, they were bigger. Yeah.
Because they were all 2 and 3 bedroom at least. And then the convent with its own, common house / room for meals and issues like that.
So you might think about it, because the visuals are important. What would they improve on? But I invite you to open the hood and ask them to open the hood and talk about how has your choice to be a blended cooperative condo community been, what worked and what might you do differently?
Yeah, because when we went there, this was a couple of years ago, and we weren't thinking in those terms.
Of course
so
not.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, and there's, it's you guys are going to become experts for one project, hopefully, and it's a lot of knowledge to take in. But remember, it's going to be a 2 to 3, probably 4 years if all goes well. I know you might not want that. Maybe there is a group that created a little, condo retrofit in 6 months,
Wow.
They had 4 units and now they're 11, and they
Wow.
did it by being able to buy houses next door that had 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 apartments in them. And now it's It's like, it amazingly worked for them. It's not, I don't know if it would ever happen again, but it did. You might still have a place, a community, a neighborhood where that's possible. You start with 6, maybe you buy a 6-unit apartment building and then slowly work your way to create, invite people to buy the single family homes nearby. But for the point of intergenerational, I just really want to encourage, predictability and lower costs requires kind of knowing what you want right up front. But you're going to be growing and changing socially over time. And so having a way to maybe one building you decide is going to be a 6-unit apartment building, and the members of that building will be renters forever, but they can still be fully validated members of the co-housing community. It's just they don't have an equity stake. What banks don't necessarily like all this blending. So, but that just means you might have 2 separate kinds of development approaches. So I encourage you to think creatively, but also at the end of the day, I would like to see you be able to create something that you can move into and then adapt over time. That's going to happen. And we can't always have everything now. So I applaud the fact that you want to try to find a blended way.
I see Rains is saying that he has to get to his event. Well, thanks for being with us, Rains. And I guess thank you too, Betsy, because it's definitely, it's 4 minutes after the hour, and I know you've had a long day, but this was great. We'll have it on our website so people can hear you even though they couldn't make it today. And we're sorry that you won't be coming to Milwaukee, Rains told us, but
At least not
maybe
immediately, but
Not
sooner or later.
immediately.
I do, there is an article, the article I wrote that I would love to update, but it's still the article that documents, maybe 10 or 15 different strategies that existing co-housing communities have pursued. And there are a few updates that we didn't even get into today. But if you want to go explore more about Rocky Corner Co-housing, which got a state community development block grant to actually, I'm not entirely clear, but subsidize a number of the units permanently.
Wow.
Right. In other, that was a more rural new build. But they hired a CDBG financing expert. They hired him, and he's very proud of what he was able to do. But the community still hasn't been finished. It's complex. That's all. But you want to make sure you have a place to live, and maybe some of the other homes will come online later. But I just wouldn't think that cooperative is more cooperative culture than limited equity condos, but how you build the community support for each other and relationships. You're going to have multiple committees doing multiple things. And I appreciate that about our movement, but good luck. And I would love to do whatever follow-up we could talk about if you need a little augmentation of your own brain power in town,
All
I could be
right.
poking around for you, or but I think the main thing is you're building your own relationships, and talking locally is going to be a good start. And for what you're trying to do, there are training academies, there are people who are starting to get what a partnership between an intentional community and affordable housing there. So be happy to try to make those introductions if we can.
Cool.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Keep us surprised of where you are.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, I know you'll be in Milwaukee, but you know what I mean. You're not going. All right.
Bye.
Well, thank you. Take care. I will log off, just me, and let you
All right.
guys talk there.
Have fun, Betsy. Just 2 more calls before you sleep.
Oh my goodness, really? Does she have 2 more calls?
Well, one of them is an improv troupe, but yes.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Take
thank
care.
you, Rains. We'll be in touch.
By all means,
All right.
be well.
And
Bye-bye.
I'm logging off too. Thanks, Alan, for hosting, and everybody else, Pat and Carol for being here. We'll see you guys at the next meeting. All right. Bye.
Good night.
Carol, you want to stick around for just a minute? We can settle up for Saturday. Whoop, there you go.
I keep trying to use that mute right next to my name instead of going down to the bottom and muting it there.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
All right, so I need to switch my brain from babysitting to what we were just doing here to you and I. So, um, okay. So one thing that has come up that's new, which is